Welcome everyone. So let's make a start, and thank you for joining us today for this launch event. My name is Jessica Stewart and I'm the Head of Consulting and Partnerships at Creative Metier. And also, as you join, please do share in the chat your name, your network or organisation name, and where you're joining us from today. We're excited to be sharing the Creative Metier 4V model, a distillation of our learning through our work with networks globally to enable each of you to accelerate network impact. So during our time together today, we will explore the critical contribution that networks and network approaches can make to resolving complex challenges. And I welcome Liz and Nicholas to join me in that component of our session today. We will introduce the Creative Metier 4V model, and we will hear from our partners about the transformational impact of working with 4V. And then finally, we will introduce the 4V model diagnostic tool and take questions via the Q&A function. I am absolutely delighted to introduce our panel of speakers. Edward Akapiri, Head of Region Fairtrade West Africa Network, and his colleague Jonathan Lanidoon, Programme Manager. Nicholas Koloff, Executive Director, Argidius Foundation. Terry Kanyua, Country Director, Invest in Africa, Kenya. Max Menkiti, former President, Fate Foundation Alumni Network Executive Committee. Glynis Rankin, CEO, Creative Metier, and Liz Wilson, Deputy CEO, Small Foundation. And we'll hear more about each of them and their work as we move through the session. So welcome all. First, just a little about Creative Metier. For those of you who haven't collaborated with us before, Creative Metier works with impact networks, leaders, and organisations to drive locally led, inclusive, systemic change. Together, we power positive social and economic impact that is sustainable and sustaining. We embrace complex challenges, enabling our partners to navigate them with certainty to achieve our vision for people thriving in prospering economies. How do we deliver our impact? Our collaborations globally and regionally foster vibrant, locally led networks that resolve complex social and economic challenges, inspiring socially committed leaders who deliver impact in the most challenging contexts, impactful mission-aligned organisations which accelerate social and economic change. And the work that we're sharing today distills the learning from our vibrant networks impact area predominantly over the past 5 years, alongside our collaborations more broadly globally since we were founded in 2006. So that's a little about who we have today and a little about who we are. And so actually, I would just love to make a start with our first two panelists. The potential of networks to bring together diverse actors to resolve complex global challenges is well accepted and perhaps particularly pertinent as COP28 comes to a close. And I'd like to introduce two speakers who've been instrumental in funding the work that initially inspired the development of the 4V model. Firstly, Liz Wilson, Deputy CEO, Small Foundation, who worked towards a thriving Africa free from extreme poverty. Small Foundation collaborates with those creating the environment for micro, small and medium enterprises to succeed and deliver opportunity at scale. In particular, they work with intermediaries that increase availability of the finance, social and human capital, knowledge, technology and markets required by a thriving, commercially viable MSME ecosystem. And secondly, Nicholas Koloff, Executive Director, Argidius Foundation, who are tackling poverty through enterprise development. The foundation works to help individuals, families and whole communities to move away from poverty through access to decent, fulfilling and paid work. Welcome to you both, and thank you so much for joining us today. So Liz, may I come to you with our first question? What kinds of problems are networks well placed to resolve?
Well, Jessica, thank you so much for such a warm welcome and an introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And congratulations to Creative Metier on this launch.
Thank you.
Very exciting to see the culmination of this point in your work and your learning. So really excited about the conversation today. And I'm so pleased to be with so many esteemed colleagues as well on the panel and hopefully joining the call as we get into the discussion. So thank you so much for that opportunity. So yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit about those problems that networks are very well placed to resolve. And as you've already described a little bit, Small Foundation is very interested in supporting rural SME ecosystems. So we're really thinking about quite a variety of issues across the African continent. And we have found from our own portfolio work that there's lots of things that networks are really well placed to do. So from our perspective, they really can provide this dedicated place for people to build trust between themselves, to engage and learn, share knowledge and experience. And also really, we think that there's a great opportunity for networks to create a space to ideate and explore new ideas of working together. And I suppose I share all of that because we believe that, because we fundamentally think that there are these opportunities to bring people together in a brain trust to really tackle problems that are very, very hard to define. So for us, those would be complex problems. For us, supporting a business ecosystem is one of those complex problems. So just really trying to diagnose the challenges is really tricky. Certainly really, really hard to do on your own. I mean, Small Foundation, it's in our name. We are small, we need to work in partnership, but we believe everyone needs to work in partnership on this kind of a complex issue. And then also, that relationship between cause and effect, of how to really get to the bottom of a problem, that's really hard to do, except maybe in hindsight. So you might be able to perceive that in hindsight. But for all those reasons, we think that networks are really, really well placed to tackle that. And I suppose even in coming to that view, we have engaged in, I suppose, collaborative practice through our own networks to do this. So we've really benefited from working with our network partners. I'm excited to see some of them on the call today. Love to hear more from them. Research from expert partners such as Creative Metier. So your work has really, really sort of shown us that as well. And findings from leading funders such as Argidius. So I'm excited Nicholas is here because Argidius have just a wealth of knowledge that they've been willing to share that's really pertinent. But I suppose for those who are interested, I also wanted to cite that we've been particularly influenced by a framework called the Cynefin framework, which is really thinking about that complexity, which has kind of opened up our thinking about complex problems and potentials, ways to engage with them. And also School of System Change as well. We work with them a lot to think about systems and complex problems. And for us, it needs something that's a bit different from business as usual. And that for us is impact networks.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you. And Nicholas, I wonder if you would like to pick up on what these kinds of problems, and perhaps pick up on Liz's points as well, if you'd like to.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to be here and lovely to be thinking about networks. Having just come from Cape Town, South Africa, spending a whole week with a network and possibly giving birth to another one. So I think for me, the first piece of networking is indeed what Liz points out, is this capacity to build trust. And into that trust and out of that trust comes that possibility to work together to understand the complex systems which the network wishes to address itself, to begin to ideate both collectively and individually better approaches to that, and to be able to learn from each other. I think another important dimension, and that was clearly articulated last week, was that a network can combine a singular voice of a common purpose and be able to talk to other actors in the space in which it's working in a way that doesn't necessarily allowed for by an individual organization. So last week, you had a network of local capital providers, so local institutions providing financing or seeking to provide financing to in this case, small and medium enterprises, in a room together with a number of investors, so the people they're actually seeking to identify money from. and being able to articulate collectively what are some of the challenges of that, what are some of the opportunities of that, and in a way that was safe, that was honest, that was open, and then have the investors be able to respond to that and say, well, we understand that these are your challenges, this is how it relates to our challenges, and can we then find better pathways to resolve some of these going forward. So that sense in which of articulation of voice based on a real understanding of the system in which you're functioning, a sense of commonality and common purpose is one of the reasons why I think networks can be really, really important. And from a funder's point of view, networks enable you to support a process of engagement which is certainly of a significant order of magnitude greater than working with an individual part, if they work, of course. And so that's also very important, that sense in which you can actually elevate a whole space through this sort of peer engagement and peer learning and peer action is very helpful.
Fantastic, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that the kinds of problems that networks are well suited to is those that require trust, where we need a space for ideation, and where we need to facilitate that peer learning, those conversations, and particularly their role in providing a voice and in enabling engagement with a far broader set of stakeholders than we might be able to otherwise. So that's the fantastic value and the contribution that networks can make. Over to the meaty side of it now. So what are some of the things that you observe through your work as stopping networks from resolving these problems and achieving the impact that they have the potential to do? And I wonder, Nicholas, would you like to come to that first? What are some of those challenges you see?
So, I mean, you might put those in the sort of internal bucket and the external bucket. The internal bucket is that networks clearly have to have articulated common purpose, and they need to clearly understand the boundaries of who belongs and why, and who doesn't belong, and also why, because networks, like organizations, can fail because they're not absolutely clear about what they don't do as well as what they do, and that's an important piece of this. And so therefore, and networks, and you have to have exercised significant levels of patience. I mean, building collaboration and trust is a long-term play after achieving impact and change, and therefore you can't immediately assume instantaneous results are going to flow from the fact that you've sat together and chewed the fat and worked out what problems and challenges actually are. So there's some of the kind of simple internal challenges. The external challenges, I think, is partly the sort of dysfunctional funding environment in which we all participate, which is to see much of the funding that flows into some of these spaces is programmatic. It's not designed to build organizations, whether that's a single organization or a collection of organizations or a network which helps a range of organizations work together more effectively. So often networks find themselves, therefore, in order to keep the lights on and to keep functioning, beginning to run programs which often find themselves competitive with their individual members. And so it's a challenge because, of course, it then distorts why you're there, and it doesn't effectively capture the network effect of creating the impact that you want to create. And so it's incumbent certainly on ourselves as funders to think more intelligently about how we fund networks and why, and what we aim to achieve by the network itself adding value to the change we want to bring about, rather than thinking it in terms of narrow pragmatics. But it also requires networks to be much clearer about articulating their own added value, and why, if a funder or a group of funders want to achieve X within the systems change they want to achieve, why is the network a good place to be? And not to allow themselves always to just go, oh, if I don't offer them a program, they won't fund me. Funders often don't know what the solution is to the problems they're seeking to wrestle with. Networks are an important source of the knowledge about those problems, so a certain amount of greater confidence on behalf of networks to be clearly articulating what their added value is enormously helpful, and will probably help the funding landscape as well.
Thank you, Nicholas. And so this balance between the internal, the external, the need for patience actually all round, and this key tension between the programmatic funding versus the mission, and then the need to have confidence in the value proposition itself. Liz, I wonder if you would like to share your thoughts and perspectives on the challenges you see.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessica. And yeah, I would concur with everything that Nicholas said, articulated so succinctly and clearly. And we would see all those challenges as well. So I maybe won't duplicate those, although it's not to lessen them in any way. We very much agree with them. And maybe I can share some of the very concrete, practical things that maybe are consequences or related to those I suppose, strategic points that Nicholas was defining. I suppose if we look in our portfolio, we are very much seeing that there is this challenge in the world that we live in at the moment, and with the realities of everything that's on people's plates, just of keeping momentum. So we often see incredibly motivated, dynamic, and passionate people with a clear common purpose. But often working either in partnership with busy steerco members or other sort of volunteer members of the network who are willing to play more leadership roles, or even just working with members more broadly, and just can be really, really tough for people, particularly network coordinators we hear, just kind of keeping up with that pace and momentum with everything that's going on can be really challenging. So I suppose we don't underestimate that challenge and see that just a lot, even if there's an initial burst of energy, sort of really getting into that long-term picture that Nicholas has described. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We definitely would see some of those points around funding and, I suppose, funding environment dynamics that Nicholas is pointing to in different ways. For us, sometimes we just see different perspectives with some co-funders as to what priorities a network should place or how a network should operate. And that's a reality that Small Foundation is learning from all the time. And we see networks sort of wrestling with. It's just a reality of how things are sort of shaking down at the moment. And I suppose related to that is also just demonstrating impact and how that's articulated in formally to external potential partners or funders, but also internally within the network to meet that, to show that common purpose, but also to meet people's sort of individual needs or objectives about why they would be in the network. So from Small Foundation's perspective, we think it just requires a different way of thinking about the kind of information you'd collect to show that impact, maybe different skills or mindsets as well. And certainly that's an ongoing discussion of what that looks like. We think it's different for every network, although there are some common areas for sure around, I suppose, shining a light on some of that social capital and evolving trust and relationships piece as well. And I think finally, sort of related to all of the above is just the reality of what we call the kind of key person risk. So we do see that just inevitably in life, people move on either from roles in organizations or maybe coordinators within networks. And, you know, of course, as we all experience in our various endeavors, it can have positive as well as negative impacts of somebody moving on. Might be able to take that opportunity to really stock take and review as that person transitions, or indeed bring in a different set of skills, or maybe some new perspectives with a new person coming in whatever role. But we find that's often a time of great fragility and challenge for a network which is so relationship based in our view, and it just needs a lot of wider commitment and engagement to really to manage that and hopefully continue with that momentum you're aiming for overall. So I suppose those are a few of the challenges we're seeing, and I'm excited about how the 4V model speaks to many of them.
Fantastic, thank you. And without wanting to spoil the show, it's just wonderful. I'm hearing through what you're sharing, Liz and Nicholas, there's really strong alignment to what you're seeing through your work and actually the areas that we do address through the 4V model. Not surprisingly, given that a number of your partners who have been engaged with our work. But I'm hearing from Liz, there are these tensions essentially. So it's the patience required, but then that in turn creates key person risk. So if we're going to be in it for the long haul, that patience, that momentum, the impact communication, an absolutely critical piece, which underpins the realization of the value proposition. And then also, I think picking up between something that bridges what you were both saying is around you, Liz, talking about the coherence in terms of the communication, and Nicholas, the role and the ability of the network to have a voice for many. So how do we both have a voice for many and have a coherent message and a coherent communication when it comes to a conversation with a funder, let's say, or a broader community? So in kind of just as an overview of this brief, very brief start on a far more complex discussion, the role of the networks and the critical role of networks in solving these complex problems, the unique abilities of networks to work in these spaces, but also then the inherent challenges that we see from the side of the network themselves, but also funders in seeking to fund those networks. So lots of interesting stuff to be mulling on and thinking over there. So thank you, Liz and Nicholas, so much for your contribution. I know, Liz, that you have to drop off the call a little early. Thank you so much for your contribution and your perspectives. And I would love now for us to actually step into the launch component of our conversation today. So join me to unveil the Creative Metier 4V model for networks and leaders seeking to achieve complex system level change. I'm loving all of the celebratory hands coming up. Thank you, everybody. And so for network leaders, it acknowledges the complexity and the challenges, as we've just discussed, that networks face in the achievement of impact towards their ambitions. And it provides a really practical approach to addressing critical challenges. For socially committed leaders more broadly, because we really believe that this is applicable more broadly as well. So for socially committed leaders more broadly, it offers the opportunity to explore how applying a network lens might enable you to take a fresh look at how you deliver your impact. Our team has been absolutely privileged to work with impact networks nationally, regionally, and globally, who are all seeking to achieve impact in the global south. Through this work, we have consistently observed significant unrealized potential for networks to resolve systemic challenges. We initially worked across 9 networks in East and West Africa with the support of Small Foundation, and then followed by our Gideus Foundation's support for the funder dialogue, which we'll come to a little bit later, working with 7 networks to accelerate financial viability specifically. And then we further distilled all of this learning through our work with the Gresham Shell Trust, so working with 26 of their networks across 11 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and through application with our global network partners as well. So all that just to say really that it's been a huge amount of learning on our part, and distillation of experiences and successes from our partners, and then testing this model to enable us to bring it to you with confidence. We drew equally on 3 core sources to develop the model. So our network partners' own ambitions, lived experiences, and successes. Our own approach to facilitation evolved globally through our work since we were founded in 2006, and current network theory and approaches, and in particular, the work of Converge as the inspiration for Vital, our first V. And I would now like to share a short video introducing the Creative Metier 4V model. .4V provides a model for you to accelerate your network impact. The first V is Vital. In this V, the focus areas are placing your purpose at the centre, understanding member and stakeholder needs, developing a clear value proposition, and power shifting convening. The second V is Visible. In this V, the focus areas are setting a clear ambition for visibility, seeing the system and letting the system see you, sharing achievement and impact, and advocacy for change. The third V is Vibrant. In this V, the focus areas are inspirational network leadership, embedding a values-based culture, building a committed dynamic team, and ensuring robust network governance. The fourth V is Viable. In this V, the focus areas are defining sustainable financial model, establishing viability essentials, engaging funders, and writing winning proposals. How will you balance the 4 Vs in your network? Fabulous, thank you. So, and I think you'll hear from that initial video that actually we're echoing many of the points that have been raised by Liz and Nicholas in their conversation earlier. In a moment, though, we are going to hear from our partner networks about the transformational impact of working with 4V. But let's just take a moment first to think about the ways that you can work with 4V. So the 4V model diagnostic tool that we're going to share after this is available to anyone who would like to apply it. 4V can be leveraged by funders across their portfolios or with individual investees, across networks of networks at the network leadership level, or thematically across their network of member networks, and with individual impact networks to achieve transformational change or address critical challenges through the lens of each V. Now to hear transformational impact stories, I thank you all for your attention so far and pass to Creative Metier's CEO and founder, Glynis Rankin.
Thank you, Jessica. And Liz, Nicholas, thank you to you as well. And thank you also to all of you networks who've played such a strong role in the development of this model. So let's bring the model to life. We'll hear from inspirational network leaders about their experience of its application. And these examples are context and sector specific, of course, but the 4V model is generic. So if you're a network leader yourself, do take this opportunity to reflect on your own network as we hear from our network leaders. If you're in or leading an organization, I'd like to invite you to think about how adopting a network lens could provide you with a different way of engaging with your world. And our first V is Vital. And I'd like to just think about this for a moment. So vital networks convene members and stakeholders around an inspiring and aligned purpose. And I'd like to invite you to join me on a visit to Invest in Africa, Kenya, for a fascinating exploration of their transition to network vitality. Invest in Africa, Kenya is an award-winning network of diverse stakeholders working to empower micro, small, and medium enterprises in Kenya. They work to create sustainable jobs through access to entrepreneurs, skills, markets, and finance through their unique online matchmaking platform, biashara.now. And it's my huge pleasure to introduce you Terry Kanua, Country Manager, Invest in Africa, Kenya. Welcome. And Terry, you're speaking to us from Dubai, I think, so attending COP28. So I'm hoping that's an additional inspiration for this session. So Terry, thinking back to when we started working together in 2019, how has II Kenya's vitality shifted between then and now?
Thank you very much, Glynis, and congratulations to you and to the Creative Metier team on the launch of this 4V model, which is quite significant. I see you frowning a little bit. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. It's a great opportunity always to speak about the networks approach, because I keep saying that Invest in Africa was exactly the type of network that was made for the network approach, and that would have only succeeded with such an approach. So it was a delight in 2019 when we were among the 9 networks in East Africa that went through the research. And at that time met Creative Metier. And it was at a time when we had a membership of about 2,000 members. So if I can give a little bit, lay a bit of a background, Invest in Africa has very diverse stakeholders. Our primary stakeholder is the micro, small, and medium enterprises. As you may have heard from a bit of our description from Glynis. But we also work with corporates, we work with funders, we work with government and government agencies, and mainly we converge the private sector. So we had about 2,000 members with a very lean team that we were trying to engage. And like many organizations at the time, we saw ourselves being at the center of everything that was going on around us. So what we have come to know today now as a network, we were at the center, viewing ourselves more as a service provider, being the sole, the sole organization that is bringing value to the network. And of course, with that kind of situation, as you can imagine, with a lean team of about 10 to 15, we had members that were not engaged. A large number of members could not be engaged. We had dissatisfied members, but we were doing our best and running around and very busy trying to bring satisfaction and bring value to the areas that we had committed to. And then enter the networks approach, and our entire mindset shifted. And the first thing that moved within us was that we did not belong in the center of this network. The mission belonged in the center. So of course, moving the mission to the middle and us being another player within the network who was coming to collaborate together. And as Nicholas put it so well, having that common mission that we are collaborating to deliver immediately shifted in many ways. Firstly, engagement grew because engagement was now more refined. We started being interested in what are the needs of these members. How do the needs differ from one group to another? How can we collaborate with some of the other members to be able to bring value depending on the need of each within the network? So as we started delving more into understanding the needs, data started taking on a new meaning for us. Suddenly, we were interested in data because we'd use this data to engage members and use this data to design interventions that were aligned to our mission. So we started rethinking our clear value proposition. And I'm so excited to just see it's the first time I'm seeing the 4 components of your V's, and it speaks exactly to our IIA story. We started thinking about our value proposition. And at this point, I must say something about trust. We started seeing a bit of skepticism from members. They are used to us driving the network, and suddenly we're inviting them into the driver's seat. And we started, noticing the tensions of self-interest vis-a-vis shared interest. Originally, before the networks approach, it was almost taboo. I don't think that's the right word, but let me go there. Almost taboo that we'll talk about our self-interest because we were here mainly for the shared interests. But as we started aspiring to understand the needs of each, it became valuable for us to actually understand what is your self-interest, what are you seeking in the network, and that evolved to what can you bring to the network. And we had not just a mindset shift, we started changing our competencies and skills. With the support of Creative Metier, we had to do a skills audit. We overhauled our organizational structure, and with the support of Small Foundation and Creative Metier, we were able to begin to train for these new competencies. Today, as we see it, the power belongs to the mission, and it's driven by all the members. Some members then, of course, who had previously not looked at us with interest, started aspiring to come in. We saw referrals. We also were requested for referrals for collaborations. And of course, as you'd imagine, a few members exited. The reason I say as you'd imagine is because remember, initially it was not really about the mission or about sharing the value we bring in. It was about Invest in Africa, and now it is about the mission. We've come a long way. We are going a further way than we have come. And I would say the kind of impact we see today, the kind of trust we've been able to build, the level of collaboration within the Invest in Africa network would not have happened with this network's approach. So I look forward to sharing more and to hearing more from our other panelists today. Thank you, Glenn.
Terry, thank you so much. And Terry, just give us a feel of the impact of this this shift that you've made. You know, if you think back to the events you held when you started to now, and other impacts that you see as a result of this work.
Okay, thank you, Glenys, for that. So I'll just talk about 2019 as a start, because that is where you found us and the Creative Metier team. So we would have about 10 convenings in a year. And it was a big stretch for us to put together the 10 convenings. They were also very heterogeneous in nature. We brought everybody in a room together. We had the MSMEs, you know, the funders, the corporates. And the reason I refer to that is not because there's no place for that to be together, but we hadn't really well thought about the diverse and very unique needs of each group that sometimes need to be addressed in such convenings. After our first year of the network's approach, we were up to over 50 convenings in a year. That is about, I would say, one convening average of 3 convenings a week. And it is with so much ease. We collaborate on many of these. Some are initiated by us, many are initiated by our members seeking collaboration from us. And if I speak about the ones that Invest in Africa is not directly engaged, but we are engaged in connecting for collaboration, they would be many times more than that number. So that is where we are today. The level of satisfaction has gone up. Initially, we were at 2,000 members. Within our first 2 to 3 years, we are over double the number. We are at almost 5,500 members as we speak today. These members are much more engaged, unlike you know, our earlier fewer members. And the reason I say this is because we see how they show up. We see how they speak about us. We have shared many, many platforms where we've been invited as a network and have shared a platform with them. And we also are looking at responsiveness. So our very first, let me give a quick example, Glenys, not to take too much time. But when we kicked off, you know, the network's approach through a grant support by Small Foundation, we started by undertaking a comprehensive member needs assessment for each group. And we had a target of receiving at least 40% of responses. You know, members responding can be very tough. And we said we will achieve this in about a month. 1 month down the road, we actually had to push the deadline with a further 2 weeks to achieve that target of 40%. Well, we got to 50%, but as you can imagine, intensive work. And along the way, a year later, we undertook a needs assessment, 3 days, 73% response rate. We didn't need to call anyone, everyone was keen and willing to participate, and especially to share what else can we do as a network. Before, people are shy and will not say that, but they were quick to say, this is very good, how about this? This is good for consideration for the future. And we could then say successfully there was now transfer of ownership really into leading the network.
Wonderful, thank you. And Terry, thank you so much. And as you spoke, we could hear the 4 focus areas for the vital V: holding your purpose at the center, understanding member and stakeholder needs, setting a clear value proposition, and power shifting convening. And we heard how every participant is appreciated and heard. and participants building relationships across the network, which is so fundamental to the network vitality. So let's move on to our second V, visible. Visible networks. Networks become visible when their achievements and impacts are increasingly visible to audiences and stakeholders. And many of the networks we worked with have been so focused on meeting their member needs and bringing about the changes that they seek in the way you described, actually, Terry, when we started to work together. And their successes and achievements are often invisible or may not be visible to the audiences and stakeholders they need to engage with if they are to achieve their purpose. Terry, let's come back to you. I'll stay with you for a moment. How has IIA Kenya's visibility shifted in this over this time?
Thank you. So, you know, once you really are advancing your mission and the impact is there, you find the visibility starting to enhance in many ways. So over and above, the reason I mentioned that is because we have made cautious efforts now to give the visibility, just as a way of also our members and stakeholders of the ecosystem we play in, that is the micro, small, and medium enterprise ecosystem. We want to showcase the impact, and therefore there has been particular more strategic focus into making sure we are advancing the mission. But I would like to talk about the visibility that has come as a result of shared ownership and shared power within the network. So we have seen a lot more invitations, for example, to come and speak about our work, not just in a network setting like these ones, but because we have shifted as thought leaders. Initially, over and above displaying our impact, we have started shifting our positioning to a very strong MSME brand. And we realize that now there's many more opportunities when we're invited to bring along our members. For example, in the media, they want to talk about maybe agriculture, sustainability, resilience, the key themes, global themes that relate to MSMEs. This is an opportunity for us not to come alone, but to say we would like to bring some of our members to speak about the work themselves, either because they have led it in various ways, or maybe they have been a part and parcel of the impact. What has happened, Greenies, is that our visibility is also more credible, because when you have your members speaking about the impact of the network, then it is really bringing more credibility to the table. It also helps us to share in these achievements. It's not about Invest in Africa. It's about look at our network, look at our mission, and this is how we are shifting. It has then, again, I'll touch on something I think we talked a bit earlier, shifted our ambition, because now we are desiring more. Now we are wanting more. One of the things we set out clearly last year is we want to create county networks. We have a county system here in Kenya, and we have 47 counties, and we wanted to start devolving our network so that it really was an Invest in Africa network of networks, because we realized in particular counties there are very specific, unique needs and unique stakeholders that are particular to that county. And we shared our vision to many and all within the network. And we had aspirations that this year we will get out to 2 counties. We have received so much invitations, requests for collaborations, opportunities, that this year we are closing the year with 7 counties, which is a very long way from the 2 that we were aspiring to. It's a delight to wake up in the morning. The first thing I do is go and check our social media, because we always have our own members sharing about us. And they will share about us as a network, saying, this is what I have achieved, and will tag the network members, because we have the understanding that this is a very shared impact. And I think to get to that point, it has not taken one of us saying anything to the other. It's just that element of trust and element of cohesion. We call it, we dub it, I think, a bit lightly, quote unquote, our tribe, where we know that I am here because we are, and we move that way, understanding we are is anchored on the mission. So that is how far we have gone. Our network does include academia, and it also includes media organizations. And therefore, there has also been an effort for us to get into channels we haven't been before. Many of these aspirations and thoughts and ambitions have not come from the organization itself as a network coordinator, but from network members coming together and saying, you know, here is something that we could do to push thought leadership. The final aspect I will touch on, and this is relating to what has been said earlier, singular voice over combined purpose, is that now we are engaging in policy. And that before was a space that was difficult to be had. But suddenly we're engaging in policy, we are getting a space in the media to engage in policy. And it has always been about our mission that this policy or that policy needs an MSME voice. And this is how we can propose, or we can, you know, recommend that we go about making sure that the policy takes care of this very critical member, because MSMEs drive the economy in our part of the world. Thank you.
Terry, thank you. And I think we can also offer our congratulations, as I understand that you have recently won the Safaricom Corporate Supplier of the Year Award, competing with more than 600 entities to win that award. And I think this is a huge tribute to the work you've been doing, and at the same time is going to further increase your visibility. So thank you. And as we spoke, we could hear, you know, a real description of visible networks, clear ambition for visibility, seeing the system and letting the system see you, sharing achievement and impact, and playing an important role in advocacy for change, which you've described as you move into that policy space to really advocate on behalf of your network members. And it's just wonderful to hear the way in which you've brought those stakeholders together on behalf of your entrepreneur members. So thank you very much, Terry. We really appreciate your contribution. And our next V, our fourth V, is vibrant. Sorry, our third V, I'm one ahead. Our third V is vibrant. So vibrant networks embed a networks approach through governance, internal team engagement, and skills building. And Terry, I think when we were talking earlier, you were talking about the way in which this visibility has really also enabled IIA Kenya to recruit and attract a very different level of talent to the level of talent you were able to attract earlier. So people coming to you, wanting to be involved and wanting to engage. And this speaks to really three of the focus areas of vibrancy in particular. So inspiring network leadership, a values-based culture, and a committed dynamic team. And our research demonstrated that the challenges that many networks dependent on project have in retaining staff, and Nicholas, this alludes to something you said earlier, and what you were also saying earlier, Liz, about this difficulty of retaining staff and maintaining the culture, networks approach. And absolutely fundamental to this is our fourth critical focus area for vibrant networks, robust network governance. And I'd like to introduce you to Max Mankiti. Max, former president of the Fate Foundation Alumni Network Executive Committee, to talk about his role, or your role, Max, in the changes that you have achieved through your alumni governance. So Fate Foundation is Nigeria's foremost enterprise support organization, enabling aspiring and emerging Nigerian entrepreneurs to start, grow and scale their businesses. Fate Foundation has reached more than 230,000 entrepreneurs since its inception in the year 2000. The work is supported by more than 1,200 volunteers, many of whom are members of the Fate Foundation alumni work, graduates of Fate Foundation programs. And Max, as president of the Fate Foundation alumni, what was the governance challenge that you were seeking to address when we first met?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Glynis. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. First of all, I think a big congratulations is in order. It's the 4V. I call it 4V for very fantastic. So that's my takeaway on that. So congratulations, you guys are doing a great job. But then again, you know that. So let me talk a little bit about the challenges, which is what your question was around. So I became the president of the Alumni Exco, and sometime around 2019, and we had an Exco team put together. And our mandate was no mandate, because we were the first Exco, and Faith Foundation was trying to move in the direction of trying to develop an Exco to help integrate the Alumni Association into the works that it was doing. So I was president, and I served alongside a vice president, secretary, and other posts. There were 6 of us in the Exco. And we looked around and decided we would start by sampling opinion of our alumni members, because this was a new body put together. And we were cognizant of the fact that we were there to represent them and to get the best of them. So while we started canvassing and speaking to different pockets and groups of entrepreneurs spread around Nigeria, COVID happened. And that, of course, changed the world, and that changed everything. And it changed all the agenda we had as an Exco, and everything changed. So that was the first big, massive pivot that we had to do. So from having this plan that was what we were meant to do, achieve, we're suddenly pushed into another direction. But, as entrepreneurs, there's nothing that's really bad, right? As long as you're able to adapt and you're able to take things in your stride, you're always going to be able to use things to take you higher. So we started running basically digitally, and Faith Foundation and the Alumni Association were very quickly able to put up strong digital platforms, and we started training for our people, teaching them on COVID safety, helping them reach across to get bits and pieces of money that was being offered by associations and the government to help entrepreneurs get through the COVID period. The tenure was for 2 years in the initial stage. So during COVID, we sat back, the Exco, we sat back and we thought about it, and we decided that the strongest thing we could do, apart from the immediate urgency of creating programs to boost income or survivability of the alumni members, we decided that the strongest thing we could do was to look at the Exco, look at the Alumni Association, and build a strong base, attract all the entrepreneurs that had not been in contact, give value, define a constitution. And that was the first thing that would hold the executive, both now, both us and in the future, into account. So that was what took about 80% of our work, Glynis. So we had several retreats. We had to define a mission statement for the Alumni Association. We had to define a clear vision. We had also to look at the key roles that were necessary. Part of that brainstorming process that we did is we also came out with subcommittees, and we were able to define steps of leadership, different leadership positions leading right up to the Exco and then leading up to the president, which was myself there. So in the constitution, we decided that we were going to, as they say, tie our own hands, right? Because we had a carte blanche, and we felt it was absolutely necessary for us to put in corporate governance structures that would make sure that the foundation that we were laying would be there for years, decades to come, and that successive people that would come in would have a robust platform with tools that they would need to be able to work. So things like the Constitution were one of those such foundational tools. Now, after our 2-year tenure was expiring, we're still in the middle of COVID. So we had a special invitation, to carry on for another year, extension of another year. Long story short, we went to an AGM that was pitched to us. We accepted to serve. So that was 2 years and 1 year. So in our 3rd year, we had to put through our constitution, and then we now wrote laws into the constitution. One of those such laws that we wrote was that as a serving president, you can only do 2 terms. And this was critical to us because I'm sure everybody here knows about sit-tight leadership, right? It's a big problem. And so we decided that no matter how much work or how much accolades we had gotten, we decided to limit the tenure of any serving president to 2 terms of 2 years each, making 4 years. So having served 1 term of 2 years and then having another year for the COVID extension, we were now going to go forward for a formal election where we as Exco officers could put ourselves forwards. I made the critical decision, critical then and critical now in hindsight. It was the right decision. I made the decision that I wouldn't be putting myself forward as president to run for my second 2-year time. And this was a little bit difficult because we had achieved quite a lot of things and the association had grown. But what I decided was if I ran another 2 years and was successful, that would mean I'd be on the seat for 5 years, Eunice. And I felt that that was too long. You know, given that the world was rapidly changing post-COVID, people were coming up, new sectors were coming up. I felt I shouldn't be in a position for 5 years. So I took the decision, which few people thought was daft at that time, because it felt we were doing a good job as a team. So I took the critical decision that I wouldn't run. And I encouraged everybody to run. This now became the corporate governance problem for me. So I had a lot of calls from different people, both within Faith Foundation and in the Alumni Association, asking me to continue. They felt the quality of our work was good and on the right track. But I decided I wouldn't run for the reasons I'd said. And what I now occupied myself with was this: how do we prevent all this work we had done from unraveling? And I was acutely aware that one person with an inordinate ambition in a position as the president or in any other position the EXO could influence that organization and possibly undo all the foundational work we had done. So we rushed through our constitution, got it proper, tied everybody's hands. I tied my hands myself, you know, saying you can't run more than 2 terms. I didn't do the second term. And so I faced, while people kept calling me saying, who are you going to support for president? Who are you going to nominate? You should nominate someone who you believe can run with the vision that you guys have set. I took the opposite approach. You know, I didn't say anything to them, but I took the opposite approach that we needed to consolidate on what we had put in. And that would be my golden gift to Faith Foundation. If I could find some way of making sure that we had people that, or a system that would stop people unraveling what we had done with the Constitution, would stop people in the future from changing the tenure terms, etc. So that became my own personal headache. You know, I remember at one point I was called by someone in the association quite high up, and he said to me, Max, you've got to nominate 2 or 3 people. You can't allow your work unravel. And I told him, so I sat with him and I had a heart-to-heart. I said, I don't see it the way you do, sir. The way I see it is this: if we can build the right updraft of leadership, have sub leaders leading all the way up into the exco and into the president, have clear KPIs and other things. If we can create a strong leadership frame that would make sure that the right volunteers, because remember, everyone is serving as a volunteer, right? The right volunteers who really are inclined to work for the organization as opposed to getting the personal benefits of being on TV or etc. If we can build a strong governance structure that allows people volunteer and step in to serve, but at the same time, we could see their works, people could see who they were given little chances at succeeding and learning, so that when they now ran for higher posts, everybody has already known who they are and what their capacity is. I said, sir, if you can build this framework, then I think that would be more beneficial to Faith Foundation alumni than I trying to nominate whoever I think might be a good next president. So that was my headache, because I didn't know how to do this. And surprise, surprise, guidance and creative Metier to the rescue. You know, I mean, it was just so well timed. Yes,
so Max, thank you. And we had the great privilege to work with you on the governance framework and then on the induction. And I remember that very lively event, the induction, which we were working on virtually with you, and really impressive in the way that you're by now, you know, large group of committee members were engaging. And Max, what was the impact of that work? So when you think, you know, now, what's been the impact of setting that governance framework and inducting the members in that way?
Okay, so you see, you were just a godsend, as I said, right? Were able to give us the tools. You know, I had the idea of what we wanted, but I didn't know what it would look like. So you were able to give us the tools, and we ended up creating a good induction material that had the KPIs for each post. You know, it had the mission, it had questions people could ask of different tasks. That structure, putting it in and inducting anybody who wanted to be a volunteer leader into it, has meant that the quality of people coming through has increased, because people that just volunteer without really knowing what they would serve or what was required had to now go through this induction and go through this manual, and it was designed to make them mission and vision focused with KPIs. So that document has helped streamline everyone who raises up their hand to say, I want to volunteer, to people that can genuinely understand what it is the goals are of alumni association and can contribute. That's one thing. The second thing is this, and I will say this from a different perspective. Let me take a layman's perspective. It's been about a year since I stepped down as president. Goodness. I haven't had a call, not one call to join any meetings in the Exco. Mind you, things were hectic. We used to have 2, 3, 4 Exco digital meetings every week. But look at me now, I'm relaxed.
Wonderful.
I haven't had a call to come into Exco. I've not had anyone call me and say, oh God, the president this, or we're having this clash. Look, what I call Exco 2.0, they're more focused than we are. They're standing on a foundation. We had an annual AGM, an event about 2 months ago or so in September. It was better than our event. It was larger. There were more alumni members there. The ideas were flowing. I mean, I had a back seat and I was looking around at all these things happening, and I was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. That is the test. The reason I'm coming from this perspective, Glenn, is because at the end of the day, I can say a lot of things, but the test of what we did, the test is that a year later, the governance structure is holding. The president has done 1 year. She gave us her annual report, to the whole alumni association. Faith Foundation is moving to higher heights. The association has grown. The constitution is still holding steady, and that is critical. And I'm quite proud. I'm very proud because I come from an area where people often whisper about sit tight leadership, and sit tight things, and people are afraid of transition. And every time there's an election, people begin to quake. But guess what? This is a year after elections. Good hands or better hands have come in. The association is so strong today that I'm so proud. So I'm proudly insignificant. And that says everything about the quality of work that was done.
Max, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think this just speaks so well to the point you made, Liz, about key person risk. And, governance is so critical in the maintenance and the ongoing, the continuity of work. And this is just a beautiful description you've given us, Max. So thank you so much. And just to sum up, in a vibrant network, you'll see inspiring network leadership, values-based culture, committed and dynamic team, and robust network governance. And Max, you've just given us a brilliant example of that. So perhaps we can come to our fourth and final V, viable. And underlying and essential to everything we've been discussing is our fourth and final V, viable. A viable network is sustainable with a sustainable business model, reliable sources of funding for as long as it's needed to achieve its purpose. And Nicholas, as you pointed out, we identified in our initial work the many challenges that networks experience in accessing funding, and often needing to take project funding out of necessity, which can lead to distraction or deviation from the network's core purpose, and then confusion in the marketplace about who that network is. And so towards the end of 2021, having worked with 9 networks across East and West Africa, we convened 7 of those networks who wanted to come together to look specifically at viability. This was first of all under our work with Small Foundation, and then we established the Funder Dialogue funded by our Gideos Foundation. The outcomes of this work with these 7 networks were extraordinary. In 2022, the 7 networks had held a total of 67 conversations with new potential funders. 5 of the networks were successful in winning an average of 3 new funding bids each in the same year, increasing their annual funding between 15 and 40%. And the 6 won a major bid in 2023. So I'd really like to turn to an example of this work in practice and come to Fair Trade. Fair Trade Africa West Africa Network is one of the 4 member organizations of Fair Trade Africa, working with agricultural producers across West Africa. The network helps producers to get better trade terms, access markets, and build their capacity in social infrastructure. And I'd like to introduce Head of Region, Edward Akapere. Thank you so much for joining us. And Jonathan Lanadoon, who is joining you program manager who, Jonathan, you've been very closely involved in our work. So Edward, may I come to you just to set the context of our work together, and then we'll hand over to Jonathan.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're connected from, or good evening. So just to give a bit of context, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Jonathan, who would talk in detail about our work so far, especially since we came into contact with Creative Metier. In terms of how we are set up, so Fairtrade Africa is part of the global Fairtrade system. So we're a member of the global Fairtrade system. We are a network organization, a network of all the producer organizations that are certified under the Fairtrade label. And particularly for those producer organizations that are in Africa and the Middle East, they constitute the membership of Fairtrade Africa. And we in Africa are subdivided into regions, and West Africa is one of 4 regions. The other regions are East and Central, Southern Africa, and North Africa and the Middle East. And among the 4, West Africa is the biggest network in terms of number of members, in terms of number of products, but also in terms of individual farmers and workers. So in several respects, West Africa is the biggest. And for us, our mandate is to connect the producer organizations together, give them a voice within the Fairtrade system, but also give them a voice within the region and the countries that they come from. And this voice basically is supposed to be aimed at influencing decisions that favor producers. So we at the secretariat here of the network, so we more or less have the responsibility of coordinating the work of the network. And in addition to that, our core mandate also is to support our members to comply with the Fairtrade standards in order to maintain their certification status. And this means that we have to provide them services on certification compliance. But over and beyond that, we also work with them to co-design projects and programs to be able to address some critical needs or challenges that they identify, either related to the standards or even out of the standards. So I'm saying this just to highlight how critical the work is, because if we fail to support our members properly and adequately, then the risk is that our members will lose their certification status, and that will come with it all the benefits that they drive, like having access to the minimum price and having access to premium for their products, with which they use to drive development in their communities, but also to invest in their business. So to be able to make this impact on communities, on farmers, we need to remain relevant as a network by providing these services. And this is where funding comes in. So funding is very critical in terms of enabling us to be able to provide these support services to our members. We have traditionally depended on core funds that comes from the Fairtrade system, and that has remained stagnant, or that has remained the same for several years. So sometime in 2017, 2018, we took the decision to diversify our sources of funding, which meant that we had to find ways of approaching donors, all types of donors, to be able to get funding to complement the work that we do. So we found this relationship with Creative Metier very, very important in terms of enabling us and building our capacity and empowering us to be able to realize this dream that we had of diversifying our source of funding. So one of the critical steps that we took is, for example, Jonathan, who joined the team as project officer at the time on a specific project. When the project ended, it coincided with this intention of this vision of transforming. So then Jonathan became responsible for programs that were supposed to cover products that were underfunded. So smaller products, and of course, when you talk about West Africa, the biggest product that comes to mind is cocoa. So we don't have as much funding challenge with cocoa as we do for other smaller products. So then Jonathan became responsible for these other products, banana, fresh and dried fruits, cashew nuts, coconut, all the different categories of products that we have. And then he also had the responsibility, at the time, 30% of his time, or currently 30% of his time, is supposed to be dedicated to raising funds. So he's a program manager responsible for the programming work related to the other program, but also a fundraising person, because 30% of his time is supposed to be spent on that. So we have benefited a lot from and we have learned a lot from the sessions that we had with Creative Metier. And on this note, I want to hand over to Jonathan to go into detail and to share our experience. Thank you very much for your attention. And Jonathan, over to you.
Edward, thank you. So Jonathan, welcome. How has the West Africa network approach to fundraising changed since we worked together in 2021? Just talk us through the changes that have come about in your fundraising.
All right, thank you very much, like Glenis and then Edward. I think, as like stated by Edward, there has been an intentional shift and then towards fundraising to be able to support the networks, the network that we have in West Africa, because of our participation in the funding dialogue. We became more intentionally and then aggressive in terms of looking at funding opportunities that we can be able to apply with our network members to become more relevant to our networks. Apart from that, there was also the shift of looking at localization. How do we find resources in country and within the West Africa region that we can use to be able to provide services to our members and be able to provide the needed value that our members need. So we started looking at opportunities within embassies in West Africa, and then other funding sources that are available. And as a result of that, we'll be able to get some funding from GIZ, in Cote d'Ivoire, to implement our Women's School of Leadership that is providing opportunities for women to become more assertive and take up leadership roles in the cooperatives. Apart from that, I must also say that our work has shifted to more collaborative in terms of working with our network members in terms of fundraising, providing opportunities for our network members, building their capacity to ensure that they are able to manage donor funding properly and be able to report so that they are able to use that to generate enough resources for our members.
So what's the impact of that work been, Jonathan? Just give us 2 or 3 examples of the impact.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the impact has been phenomenal, as I would say, because now we have a more structured approach in terms of our fundraising. We have a fundraising strategy that we are working with. So it gives us the direction and the vision that we want to move to. I must also say that one of the key impacts is that our network members have become more resilient, that some of them can receive funding directly, be able to implement projects on their own, instead of us as Fairtrade having to go and implement those projects. When it comes to the aspect of funding portfolio, as Edward said, we've moved more into project funding because our funding, our core funding has remained stagnant. And then as a result of that, we are implementing more projects. And I can say that we've achieved about 15% increase in like funding, and our staffing portfolio too has increased from an initial like 30 staff to over like 50 staff like that are supporting our members, and all these are coming through the various projects that are in the region that we are implementing. Then finally, in terms of our membership to have grown in terms of West Africa from an initial of about 180,000 members to like close to 400,000 members that we are working within the West Africa region, in 10 regions in West Africa.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. And Edward, Jonathan, thank you so much for your valuable contribution. It's great to hear about your work and all that you're achieving. So there are 4 focus areas that led to the success of this work. The viable V, our final V. So financial sustainability models, looking at different business models for financial sustainability. And Jonathan and Edward, you just described the way you shifted looking at your financial sustainability. Viability essentials, so thinking about compliance, but also thinking about core costs and writing core costs into bids and proposals. Engaging funders and seeing the funder environment in a wider way, exploring opportunities and partnerships, and then writing winning proposals. So we've heard inspiring accounts of the ways in which using the 4 Vs, vital, visible, vibrant, and viable, has enabled networks to transform their ways of working and accelerate their impact. And to go back to a conversation right at the beginning, Liz and Nicholas talking about the challenge of these roles and the way we see network leadership as being the balancing of these 4 Vs, prioritizing where priorities might sit or should sit, and being able to balance across those 4 Vs. So let's move on to the ways in which you can use the 4V model for yourselves. And Ellie, I'd like to pass over to you, or Jess, sorry, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Glynis. Thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their experience. Thank you to Terry, Edward, Jonathan, and Max for sharing actually the really practical impact of working with the 4V model. So our aim in developing the diagnostic tool is to make our work widely accessible beyond the 43 participants who we've had here today, and thank you everybody for joining. But beyond this and more broadly, to further accelerate network impact. The interactive 4V diagnostic tool will be landing in your inboxes and will enable you as a network leader to consider how the 4V model applies in your context. It benchmarks your network now, informs your strategic planning, sets annual priorities, reviews and refocuses, and stretches thinking about what might be possible. As a leader in an organizational context, the diagnostic will enable you to consider how applying a network lens might assist you in achieving your impact goals. And once you've completed your diagnostic, then we're offering a free review call to answer any questions that you have and to support you to take your thinking further. And we also really welcome your feedback on this tool. We want to make it as useful and as accessible as possible to as broad a range of people as we can. So please just do get in touch. And just as a reminder, when you're thinking about how you can implement 4V and the ways that we can collaborate with you through 4V, we work with funders across their portfolios or with individual investees, networks of networks at the network leadership level, or thematically across the network of member networks. So we might just address one of the Vs or a particular focus within that. Viability is a key focus often. And within individual impact networks to really achieve this transformational change or address a critical challenge. So these collaborations really transform the capacity of your network to enable sustainability and impact for the future. So do just please get in touch if you would like to learn more about collaborating with us. So that is our launch. We have heard from our fantastic speakers, and I would like in the last 10 minutes that we have to move to some questions. Edgar, I see that you have raised a question. Let me come to you so that you can unmute yourself. And we also have been having a great chat in the Q&A with Terry after a question that Marla raised around skills. In fact, Terry, I wonder if you might want to comment on Marla's question just while I work out how to unmute Edgar.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm very pleased to really comment a bit on the question, and you will see my answer in the Q&A. And the one thing I really want to enlighten and emphasize, and that we have learned, is that this is not static, that we understand right away what the MSMEs need, and we can be able to respond to that immediately. But instead, their needs evolve as their organizations evolve, because our model is around supporting their growth and scale. So as they evolve, their needs evolve, but also as the business environment shifts, their needs shift. So over and above the annual needs assessment exercise that we undertake every year in Q1, we have touch points through the year to ensure that you're keeping our finger on the pulse, that we are understanding what the needs are, and that we are constantly incorporating this understanding into any new or ongoing interventions that we have. And finally, what we have learned, and almost our mantra now at Invest in Africa, is that one size does not fit all. So with unique needs for unique SMEs, and even within those unique needs, they are shifting and we have to stay on top of it. And staying on top of it is not just our responsibility, it is a responsibility for all of us as network members to keep bringing to the fore and ensuring at all the times that we are having relevant interventions that advance.
Thank you so much, Terry. So actually, that question and your response has brought us full circle back round to Nicholas's comment about the role of the networks in amplifying the voice of many, Liz's comment about the need for coherence, and then you're pulling in this angle that actually there's a real investment needed to make sure that you are really hearing those voices and then amplifying and providing that coherent voice into the system. So wonderful, thank you. And Edgar, I'm just going to ask you to unmute now, so please do take yourself off mute and pose your question. It'd be great to hear from you. And if you're not able to do that, just pop your question in the chat, and then we can just discuss it separately. Good. So I have another question from here. So looks great. Do you have any advice as to how often and in what circumstances networks should use the diagnostic tool? Regular health check, during strategy review, annual planning? Glynis, Ellie, may I come to you around the implementation of the tool and the cadence around that?
Yes, sure. So I think from my point of view and from the work we've been doing, I would suggest that the tool could be used in a number of contexts. So one, there might be an in-depth strategic planning point at which you really want to look at and explore your network and its priorities. You might use the tool on an annual basis, again, to check in to see where you're up to, because as you described, Terry, earlier, as you work and evolve your network, then ambition grows. And as ambition grows, then your answers to those questions may well shift, and the way in which you perceive those questions may well shift. But it does really enable you to think about your priorities and to think about where to balance that limited time and energy that we all have to really make the impact that you want to make. So I would suggest those are the dynamics. It's quite intensive to do, so it's probably something you do annually rather than monthly. But it will enable you to set your priorities and also track your progress and track your successes as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Glynis. And I noticed that Ellie's just popped the link in the chat as to where you can explore more about the model. And so head over to that webpage when you get a chance. Edgar, are you able to take yourself off? I've given you permission to come off mute. So I wonder if you just unmute yourself, you should be able to speak. Okay, well, I think what I propose is that why don't we take that offline and we can answer any question that you had, that you have, and we can answer that separately to make sure that you get that question answered. And so I've also been hearing there's a discussion going in the chat about how we might be able to bring this presentation to different networks of networks, and absolutely we can do that to support this broader engagement and broader awareness of the really powerful impact of implementing the 4V model. So yes, any other thoughts, questions that anyone else would like to bring before we move to a close? Thank you, Tanya. Great to see you on here as well. So thank you, Glynis. Any final thoughts from you before we close? We can close 5 minutes early.
Well, thank you. And just to say, there is a final thought, which is that I hope that this event today has shown how the evolution of this model is very much a collective piece of work. It has evolved out of these wonderful experiences that we've shared and we've heard. It's evolved out of sharing our thinking and discussions with Small Foundation, with our Gideas Foundation and others as we go, and really applying it in different contexts. So now we're really ready to run with you, test and see how you're using this model in each of your unique contexts. And we hope it will be valuable for you for many years to come.
Fantastic, thank you. So I would like to make a final thank you to all of our guests who have so generously shared their perspectives. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll follow up by sending you each the diagnostic, and we really look forward to hearing your feedback and to exploring the Creative Metier 4V model further together. So thank you and have a great afternoon or evening to all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you.